Eddie Hearn has made a move that nobody really saw coming, and it says a lot about where combat sports could be heading next. In a twist that immediately got people talking across boxing and MMA, the British promoter has launched a new advisory business called Matchroom Talent Agency, and the first athlete he brought in is not a boxer at all. It is UFC heavyweight champion Tom Aspinall. That alone is enough to raise eyebrows, because this is not just a routine business signing. It feels like the latest strike in an increasingly personal power battle between Hearn and Dana White. For years, Eddie Hearn has been one of the most recognizable promoters in boxing, a figure known for selling major fights, building stars, and constantly staying in the middle of big-money negotiations. Dana White, of course, has done the same in MMA, turning the UFC into a global giant, and then recently stepping deeper into boxing through Zuffa Boxing. So now, when Hearn creates a talent agency and his first big client is the reigning UFC heavyweight champion, it becomes impossible to view this as just another business announcement. It looks strategic, it looks calculated, and above all, it looks like a response. That response makes even more sense when you look at what happened recently with Conor Ben. For a long time, Ben had been tied closely to Matchroom and to Hearn's boxing world. He had grown under that umbrella, built his name there, and seemed like one of the natural faces of that side of the sport. Then Dana White's new boxing operation came in and took him. That was not just another contract loss. That was personal. It was symbolic. It was Dana White stepping into boxing and immediately grabbing a major name associated with Hearn, reportedly on a massive $15 million deal. If you are Eddie Hearn, that kind of move does not just sting. It challenges your territory. Now the answer has arrived, and it is Tom Aspinall. That is why this development has such an edge to it. Tom Aspinall is not some fringe fighter trying to get a little help with sponsorships. He is the UFC heavyweight champion, one of the most important active names in MMA, and one of Britain's biggest combat sports stars. Bringing him in as the first face of Matchroom Talent Agency instantly gives Hearn's new venture credibility and attention. It also sends a message. Dana White may have entered boxing and pulled away a fighter linked to Matchroom, but Hearn is now stepping into White's world and putting his brand next to one of the UFC's top champions. And according to the announcement, this partnership is not a narrow one. Matchroom says a new agency will work with Aspinall across major areas, including commercial strategy, editorial development, digital opportunities, television work, and legal support. That is a broad role. It suggests Hearn is not trying to become Aspinall's fight promoter inside the UFC structure, at least not directly. Instead, he is positioning himself as a man helping shape the entire business side of Aspinall's career outside the cage. That matters because it gives Hearn real influence without needing to control the actual sporting contract. In other words, this is not about Eddie Hearn suddenly becoming a UFC matchmaker. It is about him becoming part of the machine around one of the UFC's biggest stars. And that creates a very interesting dynamic, especially because Aspinall's future inside the UFC has already become a subject of serious discussion due to his health situation. Aspinall has not fought since UFC 321, where he suffered a significant eye injury after an exchange with Cyril Gane. That injury took immediate priority because this is not the kind of issue fighters can casually work through. Vision problems are career-altering territory in combat sports, and in Aspinall's case, the situation became even more complicated because he also has Brown syndrome. He reportedly underwent surgery in Manchester last month, and the current hope is that if recovery continues the right way, a return to action is only a matter of time. But until he is fully cleared and fully back, questions around his health, his timeline, and his championship status remain very real. That is where the business side becomes especially important. When a fighter is sidelined, the public usually focuses on what happens in the cage. But behind the scenes, that can also become one of the most delicate stretches of a career. Brand value has to be maintained. Media narratives have to be managed. Sponsorships and public image still matter. And in Aspinall's case, the relationship with the UFC leadership has not exactly looked perfectly smooth during this period. One of the more revealing parts of the situation is that Aspinall was reportedly very disappointed by Dana White's public handling of the eye issue. White had gone as far as saying the champion suffered no damage to the eye, and that clearly did not sit well on Aspinall's side. That kind of comment matters because when a fighter is dealing with a serious medical concern, public messaging from the promoter or a company boss is never a small thing. Fighters want to feel that their reality is being respected, not minimized. So if Aspinall felt White was downplaying what happened, that creates friction at exactly the moment when trust matters most. And if there's even a little bit of friction there, Eddie Hearn entering the picture becomes even more significant. Because now Aspinall has brought in a powerful, experienced, media-savvy operator to represent him commercially and advise him while he navigates this next stage. Hearn knows how to sell athletes. He knows how to shape narratives. He knows how to negotiate. He knows how to turn a fighter's name into something bigger than just event night value. And perhaps most importantly, he knows how to play hardball when dealing with powerful organizations. That is not something every athlete has in their corner at this level. Aspinall himself seemed fully on board with that logic. In his statement, he made it clear that he sees Hearn and the Matchroom Group as people who understand how to take athletes to another level both on and off the field. That phrasing is important because it shows this deal is about more than just short-term career protection while he recovers. It sounds like Aspinall is thinking bigger. He is thinking about long-term positioning, long-term branding, and long-term influence in a sport where fighters often rely too heavily on one company to define how visible and valuable they are. That is why this move feels bigger than one contract signing. It is part of a much larger shift in combat sports, where athletes are increasingly aware that their career is not just about who they fight. It is also about who represents them, who protects their interests, who helps grow their brand, and who can create leverage when it is time for major decisions. Tom Aspinall, aligning himself with Eddie Hearn, says that even a UFC heavyweight champion wants more control over how his business life is handled. For Hearn, the upside is obvious. He gets to launch Matchroom Talent Agency with a genuine superstar, not a developmental prospect. He gets immediate headlines. He gets to position himself as a serious player beyond traditional boxing promotion. And perhaps just as satisfying for him, he gets to do all of that with an athlete tied directly to Dana White's ecosystem. That is why this feels like revenge, or at the very least, retaliation with style. When Dana White took Conor Benn for Zuffa Boxing, it was widely interpreted as a shot fired across the boxing establishment. White even leaned into that attitude publicly, making it sound like competing with traditional promoters was easy for him. His now famous dismissal of that competition, comparing it to hitting babies, told you exactly how he wanted to frame the battle. He wanted to look like the disruptor, the bully, the man who could walk into boxing and embarrass the old guard. That kind of comment was never going to be forgotten by someone like Eddie Hearn. So now Hearn has answered in a way that is clever because it avoids direct imitation. He is not trying to copy Zuffa Boxing. He is not pretending to run UFC matchmaking. Instead, he has built a new business lane, talent representation, and commercial advisory, and immediately planted his flag with the UFC heavyweight champion. That gives him access, relevance, and attention, while also reminding everyone that Dana White is not the only promoter capable of crossing into the other man's territory. And in business wars like this, symbolism matters. It matters who moves first. It matters who gets the bigger name. It matters who looks like they are expanding. And it matters who appears to have momentum. Right now, both sides have reasons to feel they landed punches. White grabbed Conor Benn and used that deal to announce his boxing intentions with force. Hearn answered by signing Tom Aspinall into his new agency and making sure the launch could not be ignored. The interesting part now is what happens next. Hearn has already announced another press conference, and there are rumors that a second major name will be revealed as the next member of Matchroom Talent Agency. If that turns out to be another high-profile athlete, then this stops being a one-off splash and starts looking like a genuine expansion strategy. It would mean Hearn is not just building a side project. He is building a serious new platform, one designed to bring athletes under Matchroom umbrella even when they are not Matchroom boxers. That could end up being one of the smarter plays in combat sports if he gets it right. Because the truth is, many athletes today are looking for exactly this kind of support. They want help with image, digital growth, media opportunities, legal structure, sponsorship leverage, and long-term positioning. They do not just want a promoter who can sell tickets on fight night. They want a team that can increase their value year-round. If Hearn can build Matchroom Talent Agency into a place that delivers that, then he could become influential in a completely different way than before. For Aspinall, the benefit is equally clear. He gets someone in his corner who knows the sports business inside out, someone who can help maximize his value while his fighting future is being sorted out, and someone who is not afraid to negotiate in high-pressure environments. Given the uncertainty around his injury recovery and the sensitivity around how his situation has been discussed publicly, that could prove extremely useful. It also creates a fascinating image. When the time comes to sit down and talk about Tom Aspinall's future, the person helping handle the commercial and advisory side will be Eddie Hearn, not a UFC executive, not a quiet behind-the-scenes consultant. Eddie Hearn, one of the loudest, most experienced, and most media-capable figures in all of combat sports. That changes the feel of every future conversation around Aspinall, even if the UFC still controls the fight side of the business. And of course, everyone will be watching how Dana White reacts. Maybe publicly he will shrug it off. Maybe he will act like it means nothing. Maybe he will take a shot at Hearn and make a joke of the whole thing. But privately, it is hard to imagine he does not notice exactly what this means. One of his biggest champions has chosen to align commercially with a man who is openly becoming one of his newest business rivals. Even if the arrangement does not cross into UFC's direct operations, it still puts Hearn in the orbit of a champion White would rather keep completely inside his own machine. That is what makes this more than a headline. It is a sign of how combat sports is changing. Boxing promoters are no longer just thinking about boxing. MMA athletes are no longer thinking only about their fight purses. The business structures around stars are becoming more layered, more strategic, and more competitive. Fighters want leverage. Promoters want reach. Agencies want influence. And when those interests collide, you get moves like this one. So yes, on paper this is Eddie Hearn launching Matchroom Talent Agency and signing Tom Aspinall as the first client. But in reality, it is much bigger than that. It is about rivalry. It is about territory. It is about the growing fight between Dana White and traditional boxing power brokers. It is about who gets to shape the next era of combat sports business. And it is about athletes like Aspinall realizing that in a landscape this competitive, who stands behind you off the field can be just as important as what you do in the ring or the cage. The offices may not have a weigh-in table or a referee, but make no mistake, the punches have already started landing. Dana White took Contraband. Eddie Hearn answered with Tom Aspinall. Zuffa Boxing made its entrance. Matchroom Talent Agency has now made its own. And if Hearn really is about to unveil another major signing, then this rivalry is only getting started. For Aspinall, the hope is that recovery goes smoothly and he can get back to defending his UFC heavyweight title. For Hearn, the hope is that this becomes a launch point for something much bigger. And for the rest of the combat sports world, the message is obvious. This is no longer just about promoters putting on shows. It is about building influence across the entire athlete ecosystem. And right now, Eddie Hearn has found a very loud way to announce that he is not backing down from Dana White in any arena.